Hello, everyone. Welcome to our 8th session in healthcare, and it's going pretty well. We are inviting people from different backgrounds and startups, corporate companies, academics, and also administrative. So we are hoping to bring an environment. Actually, we brought an environment for data sciences, healthcare specialists, and academics get together and discuss the topics. And I said earlier, a lot of these meetings are leading good collaborations too. Actually, a lot among the speakers and also a lot with the audience and speakers as well. I'm happy to hear stories from people. Maybe we can talk about such stories. Maybe after several months later, we can say what this sessions led to. And I just introduce myself briefly, and then Chirag and Ryan will introduce themselves, and then Chirag will introduce Lana. So my name is Murat. I'm co-founder of Magnimind, as well as co-founder of SmartLens. And SmartLens, we are making contactless for eye pressure measurement. In the Magnimind Academy, we've been organizing a lot of lectures, webinars, boot camps, and AI health talks. We have actually surprise topics coming up in the next couple months. Actually, surprise concepts. Hope people will enjoy it. I should say that we are the actually most active meetup group in Bay Area, and we can see that we organize actually 6 or 7, maybe sometimes 8 events a month, and our audience are pretty active too. We're getting a lot of participants for every event. So I'm thanking for our team, for Anas, Hussein, April, and Thomas. They work hard to make all these events happen. And you guys can join our YouTube, the other events. And you can join our meetup groups to get a live, you get a direct event announcements. So you can join all other. Actually, we have Facebook, Twitter, and other LinkedIn. You can join all our groups in these platforms. Now I let Ryan and then Sharach talk, and Sharach will introduce Lana.
Great, thanks, Murat. So I'm Ryan. I direct the Precision Health and Integrated Diagnostics Center at Stanford, as well as the Cancer Center for Early Cancer Detection. So we try to keep healthy people healthy as long as possible and try to diagnose disease as early as possible, and if needed, intervene as early as possible. So try to certainly the front end of the disease continuum. So thanks, everybody.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sharach Patel. I'm a clinical assistant professor at Stanford in the departments of neuro-oncology and radiology. My clinical focus is in neuro-oncology, so I take care of patients with cancers of the brain and spinal cord. And my lab focuses on glioblastoma, which is a lethal and aggressive form of primary brain cancer in adults. So looking forward to today's discussion with Lana. So I just want to go ahead and introduce her before we get started here. So Dr. Lana Feng is the co-founder and CEO of Huma AI. She has over 20 years of experience in biotech and pharmaceutical industries, mostly in precision medicine. Dr. Feng came from a Novartis oncology business unit where she established international partnerships for their precision medicine programs. She joined Novartis through its acquisition of Genoptics. Dr. Feng built the biopharma division of Genoptics, where she grew the business from 0 to $45 million in 5 years by forging alliances with pharmaceutical companies and providing CDX development for targeted therapies. The division was instrumental in Genoptics' acquisition by Novartis for $500 million. Prior to Genoptics, Dr. Feng was an early employee and held key positions at Genome Sciences, which was acquired by Becton Dickinson for $300 million, and Nanogen, which went public in 1998. Dr. Feng is a member of Bay Helix, an organization of global healthcare leaders of Chinese heritage. She was the winner of the Bravo Rising Star Award from the National Association of Women Business Owners and Industry Innovation Award from Blossom Ventures, presented at the annual Women's Entrepreneurship Summit. So we're really lucky and really pleased to have Lana joining us today. So maybe Lana, you could maybe start us off by telling us about your current work, given that you have such a great long track record in this.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Sharach. So it's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to present here. And I just want to say before I jump into what we do is that hats off to the organization basically nurturing this data scientist community. You know, this is really badly needed. And also it is very much a cross-disciplinary profession, if you will, right? So it really requires this kind of continuing education and foster collaboration with all stakeholders. So, so I really admire what you're doing. So to begin, tell you more about what we do is Huma AI is a healthcare AI startup. You can tell by the name. So what we do is we develop this machine learning enabled question answer based knowledge automation platform. So you can just ask questions of your data and easily get answers, right? And then we're targeting the life sciences industry. So I'm really excited to kind of bring a industry perspective to the AI healthcare talk, right? Because I've seen the previous talks and there's, you know, coming from the clinician side, coming from research side, even from NVIDIA, right? So hopefully I'm bringing a life science perspective on how sort of the sort of the state of the industry and what's going on, what is the need here. So the challenge here is that we all know, right, new therapeutics and new drug development takes a long time and very expensive, right? And with high failure rate, particularly drug development. Now I think it's over 90% a failure rate, and it costs, the latest number is $2.6 billion and 11 years to develop, right? And the part of the reason for this long journey and expensive endeavor is that there's just so much data, right? And then all this data is siloed. So, so basically this industry lacks automation. And then they were still adhering to kind of outdated procedures and processes. And then lastly, we can't hire enough data scientists. Right. So what we do is that we turn domain experts into their own data scientists. So why do we do this? Right. Because right now the status quo is like nobody is happy. Right. We can't hire enough data scientists, and the ones we have, we're misusing them because they spend 80% of their time running mundane SQL queries for the non-technical team members, right? The MDs and the PhDs. They would rather do, you know, complex data analysis and predictive models, right? And the other thing I think your previous conversations have addressed is that, you know, most data scientists don't have the healthcare domain knowledge, right? Sometimes they do not understand the data, right? And then thirdly, from the sort of domain expert standpoint, they typically have to wait 2 to 3 weeks to get a report back, an answer to their question. So you can see there's basically, it's this huge gap, right? So what we do is we address that gap so that domain experts can easily get answers from their current data. And the data scientists are happy because then they kind of free them from these mundane tasks so they can focus on more complex analysis.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned earlier when you ask how many of our participants from different backgrounds. Actually, we have to make a survey. We don't know, but I can tell you that I met people from a lot in healthcare. They're the ones actually most contacting me.
Yeah.
They're not data scientists, but they're the healthcare professionals.
Yes.
And I had a guy who was head of innovation from one of the corporate companies.
Yes.
And he's interested in listening what's going on. But I know a lot of data scientists like to learn what opportunities are. I can say that there's like 10 to 20% of our audience are trainees, and then maybe 40 to 50%, it comes to Chirag's answer is right, is who are already data scientists in different companies, and they like to learn what is going on in healthcare space. A lot of people wanna look at the opportunities in the area, maybe to move on to, or that some companies wanna actually move to data science, I mean, the healthcare space, as you listen from NVIDIA and some other companies. I mean, if you look at it, I just listened last week or last month that Microsoft has a deal with the Novartis on the AI in healthcare for 5 years. So a lot of companies move into area, and that's why we have very diverse community in here. Just I want to add it to that your comments as well. And happy. So your background, as I say, actually, it's maybe the first time we had the life sciences
Yes, life
experience.
sciences.
Yeah.
Yeah, life sciences include biopharma, include medical device and diagnostics. Yeah,
Yeah, and
industry.
I was checking actually since we're doing stuff in AI in ophthalmology. I found that a lot of AI in ophthalmology companies, especially their pharma, drug discovery, there are a lot of AI companies, they raise huge fundings. It's
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah, yeah,
So maybe
yeah.
you can tell us your transition from like what Chirag gave your amazing background, what you learned in your previous jobs and what you are experiencing now in like a AI in especially life science space.
Okay, great. So maybe I can tell you kind of my journey, how I ended up here. So I actually came from a family of physicians, right? So my parents' wishes were always like become a doctor, right? But then I'm sort of very impatient by nature, and also want to do at scale. So I was like, why don't I get a PhD, get into life sciences, develop drugs? Like I can save millions of people rather than do a one-on-one, right, impact. So not to kind of, the downplay the physician, they're really, really important. But that's kind of what I wanted to do. And it's kind of probably part of it is being naive. And then that's how I got into the sort of the industry. I actually started out as a bench scientist. And then again, I felt like it was too slow. So moved to kind of first product development and then to sort of commercial side and then to sort of business developments. And that's how I got into, build the pharma business at Diagnostics and got acquired by Novartis, right? And then what I experienced along the way, particularly in Novartis, is that this sort of lack of automation for knowledge, right? Because the pharma industry now is increasingly driven by data, right? And the COVID-19 is really compressing that cycle, right? But then the thing is, like I said, we don't have enough data scientists, and there's a mismatch between the domain experts who actually need answers out of their data versus the data scientists who need to provide answers, right? So there's a lot of friction, lots of challenges. So I basically said, why don't I basically co-found this company, solve this real-time responsiveness, how to get basically insights from all of your data, right, in real time, so that we can accelerate drug development, accelerate therapy, a medical device development, right? So that's how I co-founded Huma AI with my co-founder, who actually has completely opposite experience, came from Apple, and he was actually team leader for the core engine for Firefox. So absolutely 100% tech, right? But this is how you make it work. And then the reason we're doing Huma AI is that how we scale this so-called quote unquote knowledge automation so that we could accelerate drug development, right? Another thing is that we're very much a mission-driven company, right? Both my parents ended up passing away from cancer, and my co-founder also has loved ones basically die of cancer. So we're saying, right, so with Chirag and Ryan and Murat, right, so how we can contribute kind of rising water, like, raising all the boats, right? How do we kind of elevate this? Sometimes for cancer patients, right, particularly like pancreatic cancer, like 3 months, acceleration makes a huge difference. Could be a life and death situation.
Yeah, that sounds like a really exciting initiative. And one of the things I wanted to ask was, with your background, you have this amazing biopharma, molecular diagnostics, all these things. And then you had someone that had this really robust computer science background. So how do you kind of do the transfer of expertise mutually, to build this, maybe because I know a lot of our audiences, they have startups and they want to get started. So how did you go about kind of getting started and being able to communicate with him and vice versa?
That's actually a great question, Ryan. So it's never an easy path, right? There's a lot of hiccups along the way. I think you have to start with respect first, right? So both, myself and my co-founder from Tech, we came from the right place, right? So we all try to solve this sort of core problem. And then what you do is that basically this, like, we collaborate. You have to start with the collaboration, right? So that's the first thing. And then we collaborate and we start with the questions that we ask, right? The domain expert like myself ask. So it's not about basically throw all your data into a model, see what comes out, right? So as you know, 90% of this AI is actually dealing with data, right? Prepping the data, make it so that it can be analyzed by models. So we spend a lot of time basically collaborating. That's why we start with question and answer system, right? So most AI companies look at the data, let the data tell the story. So we are saying domain, and so the knowledge from PhDs and MDs and scientists, right? They are important, right? So why don't we start with that? Not only we reduce the data complexity, right? So and increase accuracy, we also incorporate this human intelligence into the AI platform, right? And the platform we build is explainable AI. So every single step that we incorporate this sort of domain into tech. So this is kind of how we work.
I think it's great, Lana, that you're talking about your platform as a way to demystify the process and really accelerate, knowledge and moving forward for ultimate, products, devices, diagnostics, therapeutics that are going to help, patients. So in that regard, there's a question coming from the community saying, can you give an example of a question that a non-technical MD or physician might ask, or a scientist, that they can ask of their data or the big data using your technology that would otherwise have to be funneled through a data scientist in order to get to their answer quickly. So maybe that could involve what format the data should be uploaded in, how they should pose their question, and then what is done kind of as best you can in this black box, this alchemy,
Yes.
then you get the output,
Yes, exactly. So I'm going to steal that word, Chirag, demystify. So our platform, the really nice thing about it is that in addition to its self-service, it's actually it analyzes both structured and unstructured data. And it also it uses natural language to connect all your different silos, right? When we look at the data, even like EHR, for example, you're never clearly a demarcation of structured versus unstructured, right? Even in your structured data set, you have these free text columns, right? So you have to have an end-to-end solution, be able to deal with this. So to answer your question, it could be as simple as, sitting on top of real world evidence and see, medical claims data, right? How many of the patients actually, were diagnosed from non-small cell lung cancer, for example, and then received frontline chemotherapy and then relapsed, and then received the PD-1 inhibitor in second line, right? So this is really difficult to use SQL to do, right? But then you can just ask a query on our platform. You'll be able to get answers.
And after your platform is used by the requester, let's say, are they ever put in touch with the human data scientist that was working on that guided process, or do they just interface mainly with the platform?
Oh, we work with our customers very closely. We start with an ideation session. So like I said, I always start with the questions, right? We define upfront what the questions you want to ask. What is the measures for success, right? What are the criteria for success? Right, that's how kind of we start with the data set, what are the questions, what the criteria for success are. And then we basically do this iterative every week, every 2 weeks, our data scientists and then our domain working with the customer to make sure we're on the right track. So yeah. I think I've heard some data from McKinsey, basically, the digital transformation is a huge deal, right, for the past 5-10 years, but only 2% of the digital transformation effort have succeeded. And then they look at the success ones versus the failures. And then the determinant is basically whether it makes business impact. So what we do is that so we want to make sure from day one, when we're designing the project, we have to basically show immediate the business impact. Business impact, I mean like it could benefit patients, right? From basically has impact, right? It can be benefiting patients, clinicians, all the way to business.
That's amazing. It sounds almost like these ideation sessions that you're having early on are providing this kind of expert consulting in a way to really help force the requester to really formulate very clearly and distill in their mind what they want to do. Because oftentimes, I think you're right, we're inundated with all this data and we're like, we want to do everything. We want to look for all the crosstabs and all the cross correlations and all the potential needles in a haystack, but you are really trying to focus in people on asking what is that most important question that you're trying to assess with this data. So, I think that's a really amazing leap forward.
That's great. So another comment I want to make, I think probably relevant to what a lot of the entrepreneurs are doing here are trying to target life sciences customers, is that, most startups are kind of stuck in this like POC, proof of concept wasteland, right? Not being able to move beyond this. I think having that mindset from the beginning and saying, okay, this is your initial proof of concept. What is the next step? What is the deployment looks like, right? Plan ahead so that they have some skin in the game and then make them thinking about how this would be ultimately used in the organization.
So I can understand that you have a diverse customer base. So you work with companies, mostly different companies.
Yeah, we're working with enterprises. Yeah.
So and when you do it, it's really a different space. When you develop a drug, drug discovery. Yeah. I think you're just doing the initial step, and maybe they are just waiting on you. Is that right? Is it a lot of? I think a lot of challenges there, because they got to start from what you provide them. Is that right?
Well, it is a learning platform, right? So they already have the data that they can't get insights or intelligence out of, right? So we start with the internal data sets and then sort of the top burning questions. And that's kind of, think of it, we establish a baseline for the machine learning platform for that use case.
And then, okay, and then you have a different, you have very diverse customer space. And in our case, actually, in Magnimind, we have a Magnimind Labs. We're doing diverse research project. It's even getting really harder to actually deal with like all AI in healthcare. I thought when I started, it wasn't as diverse, but now it's a huge area. So actually, you're doing that. You're dealing with the diverse background. So how do you handle that as a company?
Oh, that's a great question. So we actually have use cases from sort of R&D for pharma to like clinical development all the way to like, medical affairs and commercialization, right? Even though the companies can be diverse, for example, you can be in medical devices versus biopharma. But if you look at the regulatory industry, right, it's the same, right? It's regulated by the FDA. You need to run clinical trials, right? You need to basically engage key opinion leaders and healthcare professionals, right? You need to commercialize based on all these guidelines. Is of course R&D. They're very, everyone, like even, medical device, like genomics companies use omics data and TCGA, right? And then, biopharma company also use, so the core data are very similar. There might be variations, but I want to say there's tons of commonality.
And Lana, you mentioned clinical trials, which is of course very important, especially for diseases that are not as common. And so there have been attempts, at doing these adaptive clinical trial platforms to get at the answer sooner, where we request less patients to enroll, but still get to an answer of a success or failure earlier on. There was the iSpy trials in breast cancer. There's the GBM Agile, trial platform for patients with glioblastoma. Is there any room for your platform then to do interim analyses of clinical trial data to make earlier decisions regarding potential signals of success or failure? Are there any attempts being made in that arena?
Yes. So for the clinical trials, what we've done is that we put this question and answer system on top of clinicaltrials.gov, right? So it's a public data source, 350,000 trials with like 47 table underneath. It's a combination of structured and unstructured data, right? So for what we can do, you can just say, okay, show me like the breast cancer or glioblastoma PIs from Stanford University. It immediately can surface basically who are the PIs and what are the trials they're conducting. So the standard status quo for clinicaltrials.gov, you basically filter, right? You filter the disease, you filter intervention phases, and you probably surface 50, 100 trials, and then you have to analyze it one at a time manually. So so this is kind of our contribution. We'll be able to do instant comparisons and getting the insight what you're looking for.
I also wonder, kind of
That's
even
great.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Okay, my bad. Yeah, no, I kind of thinking of Chirag's question. If you even went earlier on, at the question level, because you have so much experience, do you find that sometimes you kind of massage the question, like, that's a great question, but it might be better for you based on downstream regulatory or this and that that you actually ask these questions or change the question. Do you kind of do that dynamic with your customers as well?
We do. It's very much a collaborative approach, right? We're saying, okay, this might be a better question. Of course, they might come back and say, no, we're interested in this because, right? So this whole human interaction, this process, we think is a really important part of AI, right? It should not be forgotten. It should be part of the machine learning. So this is kind of how we incorporate it.
There's another question coming from the community about whether you use machine learning, natural language processing to do electronic health medical record analyses in regards to helping doctors save time by kind of prepping their notes by going through their history of the patient's chart, for example, so they can focus more time on patients. Are there any test cases that you have in that arena?
We actually have one use case. Yeah, that's a great application for our platform. And then unfortunately, we haven't focused on that just because, my background is not from the health systems, right? So, so again, going to at scale. So kind of life science is just our domain expertise. That's kind of our initial focus. But definitely, we would love to expand that to alleviate the burnout and the difficulties that physicians encounter day in and day out dealing with EHR. Yeah, that's another huge can of worm.
Yeah, and there's another question coming in regarding drug discovery. So they're saying, I'm also wondering if there's a use case in a benefit risk analysis for drugs seeking approval with current standards of care. In other words, is the health economics aspect something that can benefit from AI or machine learning?
Yes, yes. One of the advantage of our platform is being able to connect your internal data with external data sources, right? I think this is where you can basically look at what your data is in terms of your development, right? The data, and then you basically look at all the sort of the approvals or the health benefit type of external data sources to get to that final knowledge. Yeah.
So I should say that to audience, please write your questions in Q&A session. Although chat session is good, cannot as good as manages the chat session as the Q&A session, because your question may get lost in there. So I have a question, since you're a diverse background and you work with the enterprise, what areas do you see a lot of demand in AI? So what areas of life sciences, I should say?
So I'm looking at demands based on sort of how many startups are in that sector, right? So if you look at the sort of the life sciences continuum, right? So a hot area for AI companies would be drug discovery, right? So that makes total sense. You have some really kind of high-flying, highly valued startups there. And then next sort of is the clinical trials, right? So again, I think there are 200 startups in sort of the clinical, maybe more now. And then you have I think those are probably the two biggest areas I want to say for, and of course, oh, how did I forget imaging, right? Image classification, that's, widely used now. Actually, there's a number of FDA approvals now for sort of diagnostics based on AI image classification. Yeah.
Also, there's this big push now on using companion diagnostics, and as you know, for any kind of therapy, The diagnostic could be an imaging diagnostic, it could be a blood diagnostic, any kind of biospecimen-based diagnostic that's a companion to a drug. Is there any way that your technology and your platform could help assist a company that's evaluating a new drug that targets a particular protein or a particular gene to query the existing data in the literature or through clinicaltrials.gov to come up with a companion diagnostic that may be available from a early phase biotech company that's developing a new diagnostic and kind of partner these initiatives together? Would there be any room for something like that?
Yes, we actually have a use case for that, right? Basically going through the literatures and trying to find what is the ideal target. Yep.
And kind of building on that question. So sometimes, results in the literature can vary and can be even incorrect sometimes. So how do you vet the literature in that, you're working up the best possible information? Is it because you have, multiple findings or, are consistent, or, what kind of approaches are you able to do?
So what we do is that basically we work with customers, right? You have to define what is your ground truth in terms of data, right? We don't confess that we're experts in everything, right? So you have to define, and then we build all kinds of business rules in it, right? When you have conflict, how to resolve it, and what is the sort of the priority, how do you weight it? So there's kind of pretty complex intelligence behind it, yeah.
I never asked that question to anyone. Maybe I should ask this time. Maybe I should have asked everyone. So because we have a lot of data scientists, some may want to change their jobs. And what are you looking at when you hire data scientists? Do you expect them to have a healthcare background, or will that put them in ahead of the others?
Yes, well, I can speak based on our success. What we found is that people with healthcare background, like either in bioinformatics, or maybe a lot of them are double major, like bioengineering or maybe comp sci, and those are the most successful in our company. And then if you don't have a healthcare background, but you're willing to learn, right? So what we try to avoid the types that just basically give me the data, right? You have to spend all your time prepping data for me, and I just feed it into the model. So those are not a good fit for us, right? So even if you don't have a healthcare background, but you want to collaborate with the domain experts and start with the questions, right? And then define what exactly we need to get out of this exercise. Those are really kind of, in terms of skill set, those what we're looking for. And in terms of personality, we like happy nerds. people who are kind of really just have a positive approach to life, and then just kind of really have a deep understanding of their domain.
I think
this is by no means as a recruiting tool, but
yeah, this is great insights, because I think we should ask to everyone. People like to switch, and my understanding that I look at the space in terms of AI in general. AI healthcare is leading in terms of the demand.
Yes.
And the job opportunities. You say on the clinicals, you find that 200 startups. And I already told that another startup I just saw last week, they raised $100 million AI in drug discovery. As there's a lot of demand, it's growing space. And I guess people may have to learn about healthcare, or they have to work with the healthcare data to be able to find a job according to your experience as well.
Yeah, and actually industry. Go ahead, Murat. Sorry.
I mean, my question related to that. I mean, you see the same growth in AI healthcare. Do you see another industry similar to that growing? Because like the medical devices, number of medical devices increasing, telehealth increasing, telemedicine increasing, a lot of diseases we're learning about new information. And do you see the same trend as AI in healthcare is growing much, faster than another AI space?
I think the reason that there's just so much growth and so much activity in healthcare AI is just because we were behind, right? It's a well-known calcified industry that 17% of the GDP, right? Come on, it really needs some kind of, I don't want to say disruption, but needs innovation. And then secondly, it's highly complex, right? And highly regulated, right? So think about putting shackles on sort of the AI system to, these are the guardrails, right? You can't go off, right? So, in terms of the sort of the landscape, I really think this COVID completely changed telemedicine, right? And it's basically now, the regulations are loosened. We're seeing basically a renaissance in terms of telemedicine, digital health, right? In terms of enterprise side, life sciences, I think it's slightly slower, but it's very much driven by the need. Your patients are not going to your cancer visits, right? Or less. And then everything is turning virtual. Even clinical trials are going virtual, right? And your healthcare professional engagements are virtual. So how do you kind of deal with this?
And you mentioned clinical trials. I mean, what do you think are the best opportunities to kind of leverage your platform in clinical trials? Like, things like patient matching and, there's a variety of different aspects I think you could look at.
Yeah, there are some great startups in that space, right? So we're a proponent that we're not best thing since sliced bread for everybody, right? So we're a startup, so we need to kind of focus. Those are all the capabilities, but there are already great startups doing sort of solving the needs right now in terms of patient matching and what have you, right? Our value add is really in this being able to connect these different silos and different structured and unstructured data. So right now we're really seeing traction in medical affairs where, so they need to engage the HCPs on the scientific level, right? But then they need to basically curate all these different type of materials, right? From PubMed, from the internal data, and also these insights, right? So what are their complaints? What are their challenges? So, and then they're really close to sort of launch a new product. So there's a huge pain. So we're seeing huge traction there. That's kind of our current focus.
There's another question coming from the community, Lana. Could you talk more about Huma AI and its current operations and what you're doing with your customers, global pharma, and medical device companies? Maybe additional test cases or just general kind of emerging patterns you've seen in how you're working and engaging with these other partners?
So we typically, we're a software as a service company. So we typically engage these customers. You have a need already in mind, right? And then we start the discussion. And we are big believer of crawl, walk, run, right? Start small, take baby steps, right? But with the end goal in mind. So and then basically those are typically fee for service, non-recurring engineering revenue, right? Start small and then build a use case and then go. And then once it's deployed, it's basically a standard licensing fee. Does that answer your question? I know it's a quite broad.
Yeah. Well, no, I think that's great. I mean, I'm sure if we'll get more questions coming in as follow-ups if they're coming in, Yeah. Another one that's coming in is how different, so these kind of are somewhat related, but one's a comparison. How does your platform compare to something like IBM's Watson? And also a more general question, how intelligent really are these systems today? And where do you envision artificial intelligence systems going, in the next 5 or 10 years?
Okay, so let me first answer the question on Watson, right? So Watson is very much a sort of a deep learning tool, right? And it is very much a data scientist solution. And so ours is, remember I said we're kind of that last mile, right, for end users. So that is the biggest difference. So we would see we can actually sit on top of, if a company already use Watson, for example, developed all the models and what have you, and we can sit on top. Because this is one of the biggest challenges in these life sciences companies is that, data scientists do these very complex, deep learning neural network type of predictions. But then who are the users who actually need to get, intelligence to make decisions out of it? So it's not that usable. So we can be that kind of the last mile to make their, work being more productive, if you will.
And are there opportunities you think in more like the real-time data? I mean, you can kind of define that in different ways. I mean, you're leveraging the EHR, but there's also, in the era of like Internet of Things, there's continuous monitoring approaches too, which might not be practical potentially for this, but like how like continuous, or how much do you think you would want to push your model to be able to integrate these different data sets?
I think real time is huge, right? Real time is the future, right? I think the IoT, Internet of Things, is another huge area, right? Like for example, sleep, right? We spend like what 6, 7, 8 hours in sleep. How much data do we have about our own sleep, right? Yeah, so being able to actually collect that data and then say, okay, how did I sleep last night, right? So and then correlate it with your lifestyle, right? Oh, I ate after 8, right? I had a late night snack. That probably can correlate with your behavior. That also it has long-term health benefit, right? Because I see this as a huge area. Yeah.
I mean, there is a question about how likely your platform will elevate the drug side effects, but I guess this is a different research than you're doing. You're working on drug discovery rather than you're looking for drug efficacies or safety.
Oh,
You work,
actually, this is a huge problem. Yeah, this is one of the use cases we're actually discussing is this pharmacovigilance and adverse events, right? Because a lot of that information is in the unstructured format, and you have to connect it with other sort of data sources to actually monitor that and getting the insights. Yeah, that's actually a great use case for us.
I mean, you brought up a good point on that. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of questions you cannot answer because there is no technology, no data yet. Like everyone should be able to enter what they feel in terms of when they use the drug. It goes to telehealth platforms,
Yeah.
so they should be entering all their information. They should be compliant with it, and then you can analyze it, and that's another hurdle.
Yeah.
Or maybe a technology you can record what people are doing like Alexa or
Yes.
Google, but it also goes to privacy issues.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
are you getting data from such platforms or any new startups platforms for monitoring people's like health performance?
That's not what we're doing because
Okay.
we're in this highly regulated industry, right? In fact, the industry is kind of approaching this voice capability very cautiously, particularly if you're dealing with Europe, the GDPR is like, are you listening, right? So we have voice capability, but we have to design it in that as soon as the answer is returned, you have to shut it down, right? So it's not continuous listening.
So you mentioned the kind of guardrails that are present, by the regulatory agencies on what can and cannot be done with AI. To what extent is your company or other companies, focusing on the regulators?
Yeah, I think the regulatory is actually a big piece of this. Even the medical affairs group that we currently. Sorry, you froze a little bit, Chirag. No, you go ahead.
Oh,
go
sorry
ahead.
about that. Okay, yeah, I guess the general question is, certainly you have a framework in which you're operating based on a regulatory scheme or regime. To what extent is your company or other companies working with the regulators to help them better understand some of the contours of that so that they can maybe widen the guardrails but still maintain safety so that you can have better, more working space and more potential applications for your platform?
Yeah, we have not worked with the regulators yet, and we'd love to. And then from our perspective, how we deal with sort of this regulation, and then what we do is we basically build a explainable AI. So every question, every answer we surface, there's actually explanation of how we came up with the answer, and there's also feedback, thumbs up and down, so that the domain expert can say, okay, this is not correct, right? So that they can put in input. And also if we surface, for example, from a clinical protocol, we actually have a saying, okay, this is the content you're looking for, but click back to the original document so you can validate. Yeah, we're very mindful of the regulatory requirements.
I also wonder, the other part of that is, protecting IP and things like that. I mean, other kinds of, if you're pulling data from different areas, you can say is this patent prosecutor have a high percentage of failure for people or things, so you can actually, I was thinking, as companies kind of develop some of their business plans or what things they want to secure, they may come to you and think, oh, what's the likelihood of actually being able to secure this? Because I could get this person reviewing it, which is most likely to have this outcome. Is that something that you guys are interested in exploring as well?
It's a great application, but no, we can't, because we're a startup. We have to be focused. And the other thing is, it's actually quite a bit of NLP companies for the legal segments. So, if the people in needs, I can definitely direct them that way.
So there, I'm going through, because we came close to the last few minutes. I'm looking at the questions. There is really diverse questions because we talk about diverse topics.
That's great.
It's hard to arrange the questions because some of them really specific, and I don't want to go in those. And so there is one question that came last. So how about analyzing bioanalytical data from like ELISA genomics for ongoing trials to learn about efficacy of real time? Do you do that in your
we do that already. Yep.
Oh, okay. And then do you connect this with a lot of other data sets, or just you do specific niche trials, like just genomics data?
We connect with other data. In fact, one of the companies, they have 13 different type of data sources, like you said, ELISA, right? You have genomics, and you have RNA sequencing, expression, all these different data, right? So we can sit on top and basically connect all these different silos, even with like TCGA, for example, PubMed. This is really kind of the power of the platform.
And there's another question, sorry, Chirag. And someone left the biomed research years back, and then he want to enter the space again, and has a good data science background. What do you have a recommendation for people? Actually, this comes back to like old one. I mean, he re-entering the space, but a lot of people want to enter the space. Do you like, one thing, I have a question myself. Do you see open data sources people can go and train themselves, and then when they come to you, they've already ready for this, they practiced it?
Oh, I'm a big proponent for that. I highly recommend it, right? And then there's so much good stuff in open source in the public domain now, right? Like for example, there's Bird, there's all these other stuff, right? There's the GPT-3. Although GPT-3 probably it's going to be difficult to kind of narrow your training, right? And I heard, and also it takes what, $5 million to run all those, a crazy number. But my point is that there's tons of stuff in the public domain. Definitely, GitHub, use it, right? So a lot of self-education from the industry standpoint, last I heard, is that some pharma companies are like trying to create an academy to kind of teach a data scientist about life sciences. So kind of fill that gap. And then I think it's going to be a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah, that's good. So there is another question which I want to answer myself. There is someone asking regression, clustering, statistic model, and same model we use in ML DL field. What is the difference between statistics and ML DL, these models? I can just give my answer to that. I'm a particle physicist in training that goes back 15 years ago. And I use a lot of the statistic models. And then those models, some of them came as a good AI tools, ML tools. So I guess they are more organized way of getting the statistics out of, out from machine learning. And we didn't do prediction in statistics, which ML does the prediction. Do you have any answer to add to that one, or?
And then remember, I'm not a data scientist. I'm not a computer person.
Yeah.
I know my limits.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much. Go ahead, Sharach.
Yeah, there's another question coming in, Lana, for example, you've been mentioning throughout our discussion today about Huma AI as being a startup and how it's really important to focus on what your core mission is. One of the questions coming in is, what challenges is Huma AI facing right now as it's developing its product and its platform?
I think as a startup, right, your number one challenge is always funding, right? I think as a CEO, you're always raising, and then you always want to grow fast, right? But then it's kind of always limited by funding, yeah, because we're looking for, we had raised a seed round last year. Now we're kind of actively looking for the next round, so we can we're seeing tons of traction. We're kind of looking for funding so that we can kind of scale, yeah.
Following up on that, I think this is one of the questions that came up in one of our previous AI talks was, how has fundraising changed in the era of COVID-19? When you can't necessarily meet for a meal or a coffee or something like that in person, and you may need to do this online or virtually.
Oh, great. Yeah. So I think it really depends, right? Some I've seen and I've heard VCs now writing check without ever meeting the founders. But then, our existing VCs who put money in our seed round and they've done investment still during pandemic, they're saying they definitely have to meet face-to-face, social distancing, wearing masks. But then that kind of putting limits on people who are outside the Bay Area.
Yep, I mean, we have also investors, they just want to meet, and then that meeting has been delayed, and a lot of investors getting delayed, although they want to invest. Yeah. The second thing I should just put out to our experience that when COVID first started, a lot of investors get confused, they don't know what to do. Because like market went down, it's crazy, and then went up, it's crazy. So, and then they're curious if what they should invest in, but now it's getting more clear. And as time passes, they understand more importance of, remote technologies, and including like AI technologies. So I think it's getting better and better. So as we start to talk more investors, I can see it's better. So I shall thank everyone. I think we get close to time. Thanks for attending, Lana, Chirag, and Ryan. It was good, nice, insightful conversation. Thank you for our participants. It's been really going well, and hope to continue next time.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Lana. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay,
Take care.
bye.
Bye.